The Los Angeles urbanized area is the densest in the United States. It is denser than New York, Chicago, or San Francisco, measured across their full urbanized areas. According to the 2020 census, the LA urbanized area averages 7,476 people per square mile. By comparison, New York's comes in at 5,981. That number tends to stop people cold because everything they know about LA seems to contradict it. The city is a synonym for sprawl. It's the city Americans picture when they imagine a landscape of endless single-family homes, 8-lane freeways, and a downtown nobody goes to. This assumption is so widespread that it shows up in urban planning textbooks, in political arguments about housing, and in basically every conversation about why American cities don't work. That assumption is wrong. And the difference between what Los Angeles looks like and what it actually is shows why the rules that define every other US city simply don't apply here. So, how did a city famous for having no center end up denser than the one with the most famous skyline on Earth? To understand why the numbers look the way they do, you first have to understand what density actually measures, because the way most people picture it is almost always misleading. Think about New York. When people think about how dense it is, they imagine Manhattan towers shoulder to shoulder, streets packed at midnight, the feeling that the whole city is compressed into the tightest possible space. That picture is accurate, but Manhattan is only about 23 square miles. The New York urbanized area covers nearly 4,000 square miles, and the further out you go from that central peak, the faster New York's density drops. Its outer suburbs are actually pretty spread out, with large lots and plenty of open space between neighborhoods. The average across what is often described as New York's suburban ring works out to around 1,800 people per square mile. Los Angeles doesn't have a peak like that. There's no single place where density shoots up and then falls away. Instead, the whole metro area maintains a remarkably even level of density in every direction. Its suburban areas remain comparatively dense across a much larger share of the region, more than twice New York's outer ring. That consistency across such a huge area is what pushes LA's overall number above New York's. It also explains something that anyone who's driven through LA knows intuitively, but can't quite name. You can get in a car and drive for 2 or 3 hours across the region, and the city just doesn't stop. There's no moment where it gives way to the countryside. Just an unbroken stretch of homes and shops and streets that goes on longer than seems possible. That's not by accident. LA is a city that spreads its population evenly across an enormous area rather than stacking it in the center. Which raises the obvious question: how does a place end up shaped like that? Because density spread this evenly across this much land doesn't happen on its own. Something produced it. Before Los Angeles had freeways, a downtown, and a unified city government, it had the Pacific Electric Railway, better known as the Red Cars. At its peak in the 1920s, the Pacific Electric was the largest electric railway system in the world. More than 1,000 miles of routes connecting small towns across what was then still mostly agricultural land. The man who built it, Henry Huntington, was less interested in running a railway than in what it made possible. His real business was selling land, and the red cars were the tool. Huntington would buy cheap farmland on the edge of wherever people were already living. Then he'd run a red car line out to it. Then he'd divide the land into residential lots and sell them to ordinary workers who could now commute from what had recently been a barley field. The railway made the land more valuable, and land sales paid to extend the railway further. And each time the cycle repeated, Los Angeles spread outward. What made this different from how other American cities grew is where the lines actually went. In cities like Chicago or Philadelphia, streetcar lines fanned out from one dominant city center and kept everyone tied to it. Huntington's lines connected to towns that already existed: Pasadena, Long Beach, Santa Monica, San Bernardino, places that already had their own sense of identity. They didn't get absorbed into a bigger Los Angeles. Instead of one city with suburbs, the region became a network of piers, each holding its own. You can still see the ghost of that railway system if you know what to look for. The unusually wide medians along Huntington Drive, that's where the tracks used to run. The red cars are gone, but their influence remains in a region organized around multiple centers, none of them dominant, with population spread evenly between them. So, the railway gave Los Angeles its distinctive shape, but it couldn't hold the region together politically. That took something with a lot more leverage than a train schedule. If you look at a political map of Los Angeles County, it doesn't make much sense at first. The city of Los Angeles reaches out in arms and corridors across the county, with other cities sitting like islands inside it. Beverly Hills is completely surrounded by the city of LA. So is Culver City and West Hollywood. These boundaries were drawn by water and one man's willingness to use it as leverage. The Los Angeles basin could only naturally support about 500,000 people. By the early 1900s, the region was closing in on that limit, and every community in the area was facing the same problem. There was simply not enough water to keep growing. William Mulholland, the city's water chief, solved the supply problem by building a 233-mile aqueduct from the Owens Valley, completed in 1913. It was one of the most ambitious construction projects in American history, and it gave Los Angeles access to far more water than it needed for itself. That surplus was the weapon. The city's rules prioritized supplying water inside city limits. So any neighboring town that needed water, and by the 1910s, most of them desperately did, had exactly one option: ask to be annexed into Los Angeles. Join the city and get the water, stay independent and go thirsty. It was about as blunt a form of political pressure as you can apply. The results were dramatic. In May of 1915, Los Angeles annexed the San Fernando Valley and Palms in a single move, and the city's size more than doubled overnight, according to historical annexation records, jumping from 108 square miles to 285. By 1928, it covered 440 square miles. Town after town signed over its independence because the alternative was running dry. But not everyone gave in. In 1923, Beverly Hills was facing its own water crisis, and an annexation vote was put to its residents. A group of film stars who became known as the Beverly Hills Eight ran a very public campaign against joining Los Angeles. Their argument was, once you hand over your local government, you lose control of what gets built and where. They won the vote. Beverly Hills stayed independent, found other water sources, and became the island on the map it still is today. Santa Monica and Culver City made similar choices for similar reasons. That patchwork of some communities absorbed and others holding firm is why the county map looks the way it does. It's a map of water politics from over a century ago, still governing land use decisions today. And that fragmented structure of dozens of separate cities is exactly what drove Los Angeles to develop a commercial geography unlike anything else in America. When you have a region made up of dozens of independent cities, none of them dominant, you can't count on people making a dedicated trip to one central business district. Commerce has to go to where the people are. And in 1920s Los Angeles, the people were already spread across an enormous area. A developer named A.W. Ross figured this out before most people had even thought about it. In the 1920s, he bought land along Wilshire Boulevard several miles west of the existing downtown and built a commercial strip he called the Miracle Mile. The key thing about the Miracle Mile was that everything about it was designed for people in cars. The storefronts were sized and positioned so you could read them while driving at 30 miles per hour. Ross required every tenant to have parking behind their building rather than in front. He put in what were then some of the country's earliest timed traffic signals and dedicated lanes for left turns. This wasn't a compromise between cars and pedestrians. It was a commercial environment built entirely around driving, serving a population that was already distributed across the whole region. It worked because the people it was drawing from were already there, in every direction, at consistent density. The same logic played out on a larger scale in the 1960s when the former backlot of 20th Century Fox, a large plot of land in the middle of the west side was redeveloped into Century City, a second downtown, dropped into what looked from the outside like a residential neighborhood. By the standard rules of how American cities are supposed to work, it made no sense. In Los Angeles, it made perfect sense because the neighborhoods around it were already dense enough to support it, and there was no single downtown powerful enough to prevent it. What both Ross and the Century City developers understood, without quite having the words for it, was that Los Angeles had already solved the problem every other US city was still trying to figure out, and the foundation for that solution had been there from the very beginning. The freeways that everyone treats as the defining symbol of Los Angeles were largely built on top of the railway network that came before them. The I-10, the San Bernardino Freeway, runs along the same path as the Pacific Electric's San Bernardino line. The US 101, the Hollywood Freeway, originally had Pacific Electric tracks running down its center divider through Cahuenga Pass. The rights-of-way that Henry Huntington assembled for his red car system in the early 1900s were decades later the corridors that made building freeways through a densely populated region even possible. Buying that land fresh, after the area had already filled in with homes and businesses, would have been extraordinarily expensive and slow. So, the infrastructure most associated with car dependency was shaped by the infrastructure of a transit system the city had largely already torn out. The freeways didn't erase what came before, they followed it. And that trajectory is now reversing. Modern transit planners are using those same historic corridors to bring rail back. The Metro E line, running from downtown Los Angeles all the way to Santa Monica, follows a path the Pacific Electric established over a century ago. The land was already assembled. The route had already been cleared. Building brand new rail in a city that never had a rail network like Phoenix or Las Vegas means starting from nothing. In Los Angeles, the skeleton was always there, buried under the asphalt, waiting. Los Angeles is often described as a cautionary tale, the city that chose cars over people and growth over planning. The freeways, the sprawl, the car dependency. These are real, and the problems they create are real. But underneath all of that is a city with no clean equivalent in America. A land speculator built a railway network that spread population across the basin before the car existed. A water engineer turned access to a basic resource into a political ultimatum that redrew the municipal map. Developers invented new ways to do commerce because the old ways assumed a center that Los Angeles never had. And the freeways that came to define the city were laid down along the same routes the trains had already carved out. The density was always there. The structure was always more complicated than the reputation. The question Los Angeles keeps running into is whether the dozens of independent cities that water politics created can work together well enough to build on what's already there, because the bones of something genuinely different have been in place for over 100 years.